Afternoon. Welcome to the Hamilton County Commission Staff Meeting, April 9th, 2024. Wow, year is flying. We'll ask everybody to introduce themselves on the dais.
Leslie Hervey, Clerk to the Board.
Stephanie Summerall Dumas, Commissioner.
Good afternoon. I'm County Commissioner Denise Treehouse.
Ludo, County Administrator.
Charlie Annis, Prosecutor's Office.
And I'm Hamilton County Commission President Alicia Reese. First item on our agenda today is our affordable housing update. And we have Luke Watcher, who's the Chief Strategy Officer and General Legal Counsel for Cincinnati Development Fund. Welcome. Yeah, come on up.
Happy to be here. It's great to see you all. It's great to be here as always. And just let me start off as always with a thank you for your support of CDF and this partnership. We're really thank you for your support of CDF and this partnership. We're really excited and proud of the work. So today, okay. So here's sort of what I'm going to try to run through relatively quickly. And just sort of bring us to the present, just do a timeline review, brief refresher on sort of like the details of the program since the last time I was here, summary of the awards we've given out to date, what's in the pipeline, an overview of the overall program, and then just some lessons learned, things we've taken away from some of the work so far as we continue this partnership and this program. So it's a little bit smaller than I would like, but hopefully you can all read it. You all have a version up in front of you. Just this is sort of big picture. Here's a timeline of since we kicked this off together. So it was December of 2022 when you all approved the contract for this partnership and this program. We then had the first RFP was issued in April of that year. The awards from that RFP were issued in June. And just as a reminder, that was $14 million to 17 different projects, 550 units, 455 of those were income restricted. And that was sort of the first big sort of milestone that we were all leading up to. We had a big event here, of course, and it was, I think we were all quite happy with the way things worked, and those projects then have been getting underway. The way the RFP was structured, we had a rolling RFP after that. So that when the RFP was issued in April, it said we're going to have this one-time round that happens, apply by April, or apply by June, I can't remember the exact dates, maybe it was apply by May. We'd announce the awards in June. And then we'd say it's a rolling RFP following that. And so from that time, we've been accepting applications on a rolling basis. At that meeting, in our discussions with you all leading up to the meeting and at that meeting, I think we all had gotten a sense that while at that time there were several projects that were outside the city of Cincinnati in the county, we all wanted there to be more. We wanted to put some work into trying to have there be more. And so we took that as a real charge of ours going forward after that meeting. So we moved forward with that. In September, we had an award to a project that was inside the city, but it was a special case with Over the Rhine Community Housing Project, Lower Price Hill Thrives, which was facing a real sort of cataclysm event that was threatening the whole organization. And so we partnered county money with city money, which is part of the premise here of this whole program, to help save that project. And then we kept moving forward. In November of this year, November 2023, we issued what we called loosely an all funds RFP. And what that meant was we called for projects accessing all the different funds that CDF manages as part of the Affordable Housing Leverage Fund. So the county funds, the city funds, our private funds we've raised, our federal funds we've raised. As part of that, and the idea there is we sort of take applications for projects and we assess what's the right match of sources to project. We received 31 applications for $36 million of funding. While that was going on, and I don't want to get too far in the weeds on this, but the timing was intentional, that we issued that RFP in November with a plan to make awards in the February-March timeframe, because there were several different state funding programs that had the periods were running during that time. So we were trying to match up opportunities where if our funds were available, our collective funding was available to match a state award, we might make it more likely that state money could be brought down here, which is another big premise of this program. And so we lined up the timing so that we could match up those things together. There were three different state programs that happened during that time period. There was the bond gap financing program, which is I'm not going to get, I'm happy to get into more detail if you guys have questions, but there's bond gap financing program out of the Ohio Housing Financing Agency. There is the 9% LIHTC, which is the big tax credit program. And then there was also a brand new program called the Ohio State LIHTC that Governor DeWine and the state just put in place this year for the first time. So all three of those were being made available during this time period. And we made efforts to make people more competitive for all three of them. And we were able to successfully get an award for the Ohio LIHTC, which is the only award that came into basically Southern Ohio, for a project, the Lincoln and Gilbert project by Penrose and Walnut Hills. And then we are helping several projects apply for the 9% tax credit, which is the biggest sort of subsidy that exists in our world. This is probably more detailed to start with you all, but I'm just going to go to this timeline, then I'll try to make it a little more not dense as we move forward. But in December, we did actually, in the middle of that time, we also continued through this rolling RFP process to encourage projects out in the county, outside the city. And we were able to fund two projects, one in Loveland, which is a big 4% tax credit project called MacArthur Park, and then a next phase of a single-family home project in Lincoln Heights through the Port Authority. That February date is when the applications for those 9% commitments were due, and we helped people apply by making conditional commitments to them, which was an element of their scoring to make them more competitive. And then just today we announced the awards from this last round of all funds RFP, which were 12 new awards, $11 million, 357 units. County funds leveraged three projects within there. Most of that money was city funds, but we were able to, through the program, make three more projects happen by pulling in some county funding as well. And those are listed up there on the screen. Okay, now I'll go through these a little more quicker. This is just a reminder of the program, just basics. This is from our contract we executed back in December 2022. You'll recall there's three funding buckets: the new units fund, the rehab units fund, and the prioritized projects for seniors, disabled, and returning citizens populations. And you all allocated funds with those target areas in mind. We also had some basic eligibility requirements, which are set by the ARPA rules. But then I pulled this in too because of the last paragraph there. It's kind of hard to read, but there was some also priority you all set for geographic diversity, as we've discussed, and encouraging smaller developers, developers who are trying to either get into producing affordable housing or just growing the pool of small developers to help with our overall housing production goals for the region. This is a slide from that meeting in December where we laid out, here's our strategy for how we're going to approach this. And so we said, first, we're going to focus on immediate production as much as we possibly can with what is out there. We knew there were a lot of projects that were held up by cost delays, and we wanted to focus on getting those projects off the ground, getting shovels in the ground. We wanted to encourage, and this gets a little technical, but the 4% LIHTC, which is harder to access because it isn't as big of a subsidy. And so we wanted to help, but that's state money that's being left on the table if we can't help people access it. And then we wanted to be extremely proactive in working on the prioritized project funds. And again, that is the disabled, senior, and reentry populations. We knew that when you all established that as a goal, we all knew that was not something where there were projects lined up just waiting for gap funding. Those were projects we had to encourage people to pursue them. And so we got to work on that. But then in doing this, we also wanted to, again, focus on smaller developers, minority developers, smaller projects, diversity, mixed income projects, and then try to get creative with new structures and new products, and to do it with engaging with these communities along the way. Now, this is not helpful to anybody in the room, but you guys can hopefully see this on your printouts. This is a list of all the projects that have received county funding to date. The line there, the bolded line, about 3/4 of the way down, that's sort of, above that is the awards we made last June, and below that are what we've made since then. I can get into any of the details on these if people want, either now or later. But I think what is one of the important elements here is, and I'll show some of the stats on the units on the next slide, but ultimately that reflects a total investment of county ARPA dollars of what does that say, 17.8 million. And the total cost of those projects, however, is about $250 million. And so when you just put a sort of leverage ratio, which is what in the sort of industry you often do with these programs, that's almost 13 to 1 of other dollars to county dollars. And I think that's a good ratio, and that's the kind of thing we want to push for. And that's the theory, again, of this program, is that if the county were trying to deploy these dollars only by themselves, it would be harder to have the same impact as opposed to joining with other funds, where every dollar can go further. Here's some stats on sort of the breakdown of the types of units that are in these projects. You'll see the top two are both market rate and workforce numbers, smaller numbers, but I highlight that because there was a focus on mixed income projects, and there were a couple of projects that were mixed income. So a combination of income restricted and market rate projects. But then there's a significant number at the below 60% AMI level, which is also serving the deepest need in low-income communities. So, we're happy with the progress so far. There's a lot more work to be done, but all in, this is 770 units. And you see the breakdown there between the new units and the preserved units. It's about a 70-30 ratio. We have focused more, I think, both because of what has come to us and also because of the discussion, from you all and others at the beginning of this process, which is we have a shortage of affordable housing, and we want to produce as much new housing as we can without losing housing along the way. And so we've tried to find the right balance there, although we are fundamentally responding to the interests of developers in this process and sort of what they're able and ready to do. Next slide is, and this is, the county administration developed this wonderful slide beyond my technical capacity, but it shows the sort of physical location of these projects around the county. We'll talk a little bit more later about sort of lessons we've learned from this and ways we want to try to encourage further distribution. But it is a good, there is a distribution. There is a distribution around the county. There is a distribution around different neighborhoods across the county and the city of Cincinnati. Here's where we are in terms of a fund balance. So where we started out, where we are now, the December allocation of $33.5 million, the almost $18 million committed to date. That conditional LIHTC commitment, you recall I mentioned earlier that as part of making projects more competitive for the 9% tax credit at the state, we made conditional commitments. We worked with OFA to make sure that they were going to accept these commitments. And again, it really helps the competitiveness of these projects for an extremely competitive resource. So there was one project outside the city that we used county funds for that. We're holding back $4 million for projects in this prioritized projects bucket with disabled communities and returning citizens. That's not to say that that's all that will be spent on that, but we're very specifically saying this is sort of cordoned off right now and cannot be accessed for other things. There's a general administrative funding piece of here, which also significantly covers a lot of the legal fees associated with the program. And then that leaves us at our tentative balance right now of, with taking those things away. So these things are in flux. These numbers can move depending on whether conditional commitments have to be honored, how the prioritized projects develop. But we're at $8.4 million, and then you see the breakdown of the individual funds, project funds. Pipeline. So this is sort of what we're looking at these are projects outside the city. We have a pretty significant number from different range of developers of single-family home projects to develop single-family homes, affordable single-family homes outside the city. So we're just sort of working through those right now to get them ready to move forward. We're talking to several different developers about, again, I mentioned that 4% tax credit as being very valuable but hard to use, and we're working with a few different developers to try to develop projects out in the county to use that tax credit, and those are multifamily. We've been having a really, really, really great working relationship and dialogue with Trina Jackson, the Office of Reentry, around how to develop a model for reentry housing that works for her clients, the people that she's serving. We are deep in the process there, and we're excited about we have some, I don't know how much I should get into any of the details, but we have some exciting, I think, opportunities and people who are interested in participating in that program, which is exciting, and they've been really great to work with. And then, as you all know, we've been working a lot with LAD around a really exciting idea around their smart home technology and helping to expand that. So those, I think I can say, are coming, but they're just not ready. They're not ripe just yet, and that's part of the process that we go through with all the people who engage in this program. And it's part of the theory of this program is that they can work with us. It's not just a one-time, you show up, there's one time a year to ask for money, and then it's a black box. You work with us over time to develop the right project. So I'm going to step back and just get into quickly overall the program, and this is a basic reminder, sort of what we call the overall program that you all are the major funder of, the Affordable Housing Leverage Fund. This is sort of all of our different sources that we pool together to try to meet the need regionally and encourage more housing development. You see the different buckets up there. The City of Cincinnati HUD 108 loan product, and those are, as a step back, those are again separating the loans and grants, because loans are things that are loans to us, at a sort of very low interest rate that we then have to repay. So that affects what it turns into for the developer, and then grants to us that we can pass along more directly to the projects to fill gaps. This is and it's sort of blocked off there on the screen, but this is sort of at the end of 2023, this was sort of the sums that have been raised. There continue to be some flux in those as we continue to raise money. But overall, that is sort of where we've gotten in the last year and a half, which we're proud of. And it reflects, I think, a fundamental coordination. That is the theory of this program. Big picture. This is the whole program. This is a summary of all the programmatic impacts, including the awards that were just announced today. So this is basically from that end of 2022 period to 2024. Total commitments in both effectively grants to project and loans to projects of a little bit over $50 million. That's 44 total projects, 1,448 units. You can see of those 1,448, 1,357 are income restricted. You can see the further breakdown there. That's the sort of cumulative impact of coordinating between everybody and working together to sort of push this development as quickly as we can. Here's another way to look at that, which is sort of the different funding sources and how they all work together. So this shows how, of the awards that have been provided, where these different sources come from between, again, sort of private philanthropy or banks and or the federal government that we raise money from, CDF, the county commitment, the city's trust fund, and the city's ARPA commitment as well. And then the VTICA is a program through the city that now runs directly through us that has to do with their tax abatement policy. So you can see that's a good visual representation through the collaboration here, and that there's everybody's sort of swimming together and everybody's playing pretty significant roles in this program. Okay, perspectives. This is sort of a lessons learned thing, and I know I'm blowing past this, so I'm just going to rely on everybody jumping in or asking, hoarding up questions you got. One of the big takeaways of this experience, I think, for us, and it's not anything that's novel, but when you really look at the numbers, the construction cost escalation is just mind-boggling. And this is not something that's Cincinnati specific; it's happening all over the country. But when you really look at this reference point, which is OFA, the Ohio Housing Financing Agency, which is the agency that accepts all these tax credits and issues them, they have a lot of data around the state. And when you compare them 2021 to 2024 and what they publish around those categories, which is basically the metro areas, not just the cities, but the metro MSA areas, it's a 45% increase in 3 years. There's certainly a concern that rents have risen in recent years, but they certainly haven't risen 45%. And they're definitely not rising 45% on affordable housing that is income restricted, right, where the rents are set. So that there was already a problem, right? There's already a math problem for affordable housing when you hold down the rents. It's just getting dramatically exacerbated by the environment right now. And there's hope that that can sort of level off at some level. I think there's a sense that maybe construction costs may be just the hard construction costs, like materials and things like that, are starting to maybe level off. I think we all have heard that interest rates might come down this year, but I don't know that it's ever going back to the way it was. And so this is just the reality we're operating in. One of our other big takeaways, so like, that's just the environment. One of our other big takeaways in talking to people around the country and going to conferences is like, to the extent this kind of thing is to the extent affordable housing is able to get built in this environment anywhere, it's because you have programs like this, because you have serious local commitment. Ideally, that is multiple source leveraged that can step in to help fill these gaps, because the costs are going up, but the states aren't getting more money. The federal government is not necessarily putting more money through the housing channels into this. So these costs have exploded, and there either is a local source that can fill the gap, and you can do it, or there isn't, and you can't. And that has been a consistent theme in everything I've heard from around the country. So I think what we're doing here, and sort of what you all committed to at the beginning to sort of facilitate and spark, is genuinely, one, effective, two, is unique in the country. Not that there's not happening anywhere, but that it is, people are bemoaning where it's not happening and are excited about where it is happening. So I think this is to the extent we can all do anything about this challenge, we're doing the right things. Other perspectives, I mean, we've had some questions around affordability terms, and so we've dug into this a little bit too, and happy to keep talking about it. As a general matter, all these federal and state programs, which are sort of the foundational baseline for most affordable housing of the industry, is these sort of federal programs that have been around forever, they're permanent, is basically 20 or 30 years. And it's 30 years for the tax credit program, and it's 20 years for usually the home or CDBG or those sources. And that's generally tied to the principle of sort of maintenance costs of the building, or maintaining the building. I think one of the, we've gotten more dug into this over time, one of the challenges you have in affordable housing is, if you're going to hold down the rents, which is the purpose, the project isn't generating as much revenue. So one, there has to be a developer fee for the developer to build it at all, because you're not really making money owning it. But two, you also don't generate that money that is what a normal market rate building uses for the maintenance, the long-term maintenance, and to make big capital reinvestments. And so you have to figure out at the front end how to subsidize the project enough to have a reserve that can account for that. And the way it is, as far as we can tell, it sort of works over time, because, well, the way it works over time is essentially people go back in for a new subsidy sort of once they're 20, 30 years in, right? Because then they're like, okay, we're going to get a new tax credit to reinvest in this project, rather than trying to fund all of that at the very front end. One of the reasons that this system is set up this way, as far as I can tell, and from a conversation we've had, and just from observing it, is it's a response to the traditional public housing model. So, for decades in this country, we had we still have it, but we had much bigger scale, true public housing. We had housing authorities that built, owned, fully funded by the government, fully owned by the government, fully maintained by the government, almost like public schools. And that was the way housing was treated. And over time, the government proved unable to maintain those homes. And homes fell into disrepair, people felt they were dangerous for residents. And so you had this whole revolution in the federal funding approach to say that isn't working. We're going to move to a model that involves private funding, private developers, and sort of has this life cycle of these 20 to 30 years. And then so you're constantly reinvesting in properties, or you're incentivized to constantly reinvest in properties. And that, I think, that's sort of and if you talk to, I don't think I'm putting words in his mouth, if you talk to someone like Greg Johnson at CMHA, he'll say, we as a public housing authority are being forced by the federal government to become more like private housing developers. We have to use tax credits. We have to go out and get loans. We, CDF, give loans to CMHA. In the old days, CMHA, it was just all from the federal government. It was just they just got a budget and they went out and built it, just like a school, again. And that's just not, that was a major shift around the country to move away from that. Whether that's good or bad, that is what happened in the country. So next bullet here, it's just an update. When we had this, when this was initiated back in December 2022, the whole ARPA program, was relatively new, and at the time they had said the money's got to be obligated by 2024 and it has to be expended by the end of 2026. And I think the county's experienced this in lots of different fronts. This program was rushed out quickly, and they've been refining it as they go, and they've been tweaking the rules and seeing what people said about it. And so one of the rules they made pretty explicitly is essentially in a situation like ours, the money has already been obligated. And so now the only deadline that applies to this program, these funds, is that it has to be sort of in a project by the end of 2026. Which I think is good to give us some more flexibility to pursue some of these projects, some of the projects that aren't as quickly happening. I'm almost done. I think it's a big picture point to remain that the demand for this program, the demand for this remains strong. And when you say 19 projects, 1,000 units, $270 million of total cost, that's not $275 million of requests. That's the total project cost. That's not just like made up. Like those are real projects, right? Those are developers who have put significant time into a proposal and they've delivered it and they've applied to us and we're in a discussion with them. So that reflects significant demand for these types of sources and hopefully continue this type of development. I think, just look at sort of an opinion, is that, and you all might have been seeing this, market rate development is really almost stopped because of it's the same construction cost environment that we're talking about. It's just as expensive for them. Debt is just as expensive for them. But they're not moving forward because it's too risky. Affordable developers make their money, it's almost like a shark, they have to keep developing or else because they're not making money from owning the property. They have to keep developing because they have to keep earning fees from the development. So affordable development continues, and also because there are sources available. So having these sources available at a moment where there's almost nothing else happening can be, and I think it has been, it can be really powerful to keep pushing development forward in a really difficult environment. Now, having said the demand remains strong, it's not as strong, it has not been as strong in this process and in general for affordable housing outside the city of Cincinnati. And there's a couple of reasons I think we would offer for our sense of that. And I think this is an ongoing priority of ours. I think it's an ongoing discussion. One, just sort of baseline issue is that the development process is like a multi-year process for the most part. You're not sort of like deciding, I want to do a development and then like 2 months later it started, like at these scales. It's a very long process that you have to be pretty certain you want to make that multi-year investment before you go ahead with it. And I think when this program with these funds is a year and a half old, someone would have had, we've had a pipeline of projects that would have been years in development that we're responding to. That pipeline is just starting to develop now for some of these county projects. Now they know this is available. And that's just a basic fact. There is a reduced community development infrastructure outside the city. And what I mean by that is, a lot of you know this, that community development corporations or the community development infrastructure organizations like CDF, governments, they sort of prime the pump for a lot of this activity. They help acquire land strategically. They help figure out, sort of align community desires around projects. They oftentimes are part of the financing of these things. Those structures don't really exist outside the city in the same way, and really almost any way. And I know Kristen's here from LISC. They've, to speak next, they've done a tremendous amount of really good work around trying to identify some specific opportunities, sort of doing that work ahead of time for people and saying, okay, look, here's a few different communities we've engaged, who we think there's some development opportunities here. And that's the kind of thing that has to happen to get the developers to come in, because again, for them to take on a project, it's a multi-year commitment. There's a lot of risk involved. And to just go in blind is not enticing. Related to that is sort of like not on the affordable housing side is, I think it's fair to say, like a sort of uncertainty around, will communities support this? Will communities support affordable housing if I want to come in there and try to develop it? And that's a real question. And I think when you're looking at two options, and one is one that a community has, for example, the neighborhood of Northside in Cincinnati has been pretty vocal in saying, we want more affordable housing. Well, that takes away one big variable out of your equation. Whereas if you're going to different communities in the county, you don't necessarily know that. Now, having said all that, I think that there are some opportunities. One, I think this work that LISC has done is really important and can be very valuable. I think that the port has the potential to be very helpful in this opportunity with their land banking opportunities. And then again, we're certainly going to keep working on this. One big opportunity is that every 2 years, the state resets the rules for LIHTC, which LIHTC is this you fill out this huge, complicated application. It costs probably $30,000 just to do the application, but it has a very specific set of rules, and they use that to score your projects. And the rules are very location-based, oftentimes, meaning you get different points depending on where your location is. And in recent years, they have made a big shift to try to encourage development in higher income areas. And essentially, there's a sort of metric they have in there called discount to market rent. And so the bigger your spread between the affordable rents you're going to charge and the market rent in the area you're in, the better you score. That has sort of knocked out a lot of lower income city neighborhoods from being competitive because they don't score well. Whereas there are, I think, some real opportunities out in the county to take advantage of that. And we'll see if that can, we'll continue to try to push that. The last thing I'll say on this is that we have, and we would continue to encourage anybody's input on this. We've been meeting with jurisdictions in the county to sort of talk through opportunities. Had a lot of really good conversations with the mayor and the administration in Forest Park because they're engaging in a lot of development right now, sort of across the board. It's an exciting time there. Working and coordinating with Kristen and LISC around the work they've done, and really in every setting we can, telling the story that there are funds available for affordable development outside the city. We'd love to talk to you. And so we have some things in the works, and we're excited about them. But I think the work, we got to do more, and we know that, and we're committed to that. Okay, last slide here. Just sort of a looking forward and where we are right now. We're proud of this, but we're just in the middle of the project. But I hope we're at the beginning of the project, truly. But in the contract from December, there was a goal of a minimum of 750 units created or rehabilitated, and we're at 772 right now. In this year and a half, we all started this thing from sort of a little bit of a flat-footed, although you had the CDF infrastructure, and that was the whole theory to start. But we've significantly expanded our infrastructure, our capacity at CDF through this work, which is a big step forward, an important element of the last year and a half. And we've had a really great, and I want to call this out, a really great relationship with the county administration on this. I think we talk. I try not to bother Holly too much, or Sarah, but they have been both incredibly great to work with and helpful. And I think we feel great about the relationship and working together. So tomorrow, going forward, we're going to continue to focus on as we've been discussing a lot, developing and encouraging projects outside of Cincinnati, and again the prioritized projects, the partnership with LAD, the reentry housing, those areas. We're really doubling down on that. We are continuing and really pushing further now into more private fundraising, and that includes local banks, and we're having some really exciting discussions with some local funding entities around some exciting ideas and possibilities of how they could tie into this effort more than they already are, and the philanthropic community in general. In fact, I'm going to Atlanta next week to sort of talk with the people who run the Atlanta Housing Trust Fund operation, which is sort of understood as one of the best in the country, and sort of get a sense of what's working well there and what we can take from that here, because they have a lot of private funding involved there, more so than we do now. And then we're going to make the argument for all the reasons we've laid out around how this is working and what the costs are and what the needs are to make the case for more recurring public funding streams. The county made a truly, genuinely historic commitment. As you all say often, and it's absolutely right, the biggest investment in affordable housing has got to be in the county's history. And we are, I think, all proud of what we're doing with that. But I think over time, we have to figure out a way to have there be recurring revenue streams, because this works the best, and the way it's working now, when we can sort of on a rolling basis make commitments to projects because we know there's funds coming to replenish. We're not holding on to funds forever because we're just waiting for the perfect project to come along. We're able to make conditional commitments to help people get other funding down here. Okay, I'm going to stop there because I've been talking for quite a while. But we are, in all seriousness, it's been a lot of work, and we're proud of the work, and it's something that I think the genuine collaboration between city, county, philanthropic, private community that's reflected in this program is, I think, a really important step forward for the whole region. And I think it's unique and powerful, and I'm happy to talk about it whenever anyone asks me. So with that, I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. You don't sound as enthusiastic as you was when you filled out the RFP. We said we're ready to go, we're ready to do it. Now you're like, well, I don't know, and this ain't right. We went from $0 to you for affordable housing to $33.5 million. And I don't sneeze at that, because we had to make a decision as a board where we were going to put money. We knew that this was one-time money. And I think our board has been clear on a lot of this ARPA. We knew it was a one-time investment. We did an RFP. We had some housing people. I think we even hired somebody. I can't remember how much we paid them, but we hired some consultant that's supposed to look at all of this and worked with our administration. Jeff pulled together all of the housing people, and we had a big process. Mm-hmm. Then we came out with an RFP. We knew that we wanted to put $40 million toward it. We knew that $5 million, I know that's one of the things I fought for, $5 million to help people keep the house they got right now. And we were able to do that, and over 1,000 people with property tax relief, mortgage relief. We knew the number was $33.5 million. There was an RFP that you filled out and others filled out, and they thought we wanted to go with someone who was ready to go, ready to move. And so we did. We moved there. We had a nice press conference outside. And we've done some other projects. But then when I look at this chart you put together, public grant, private versus public loan, for me, I feel like it's kind of downsizing our investment as a county. I'm going to be honest with you. And I'll speak for myself. I'm not interested in doing the largest amount the county's ever done, but only time we hear about it is when we say it, or when we're in today's meeting with 20 people watching us on TV, on the video tube. I'm interested, and then I walk outside. We even had some people come in here and said, what are y'all doing for affordable housing? And we've got to be the ones defending ourselves. When you put it in a pot, which I think is a good thing, because I was at the beginning of CDF when they were doing small business, I know it can be positive, but I have a problem when we have $33.5 million that we put in. We had to make a tough decision because it could have went somewhere else. Not saying that's where we wanted. We wanted to do affordable housing. We didn't know who's the right person, what's the right process. But when we go to these things, it's one ribbon and a couple scissors. And whether you put in $2 or if you put in $33 million, we jump up and say, hey, we put it in a pot. I'm not interested in that. I want to make sure that the citizens of Hamilton County know that we made a dent. And I know that we have to partner and all that, but it seems in the partnership, we're always in the back. And the only time we say we put the money up is when it's time to give the money. And I'm more concerned about, I know you're talking about the future and how we're gonna keep this going, but for me, I wanted to see more like, we've got some projects, we put some money in. The chart that you gave us has a lot, and I live in the city, so I'm all for the city too, but we're kind of struggling, like you said, on the outskirts. And I think before we put more money in, we need to kind of fix that. We've got to try to figure out, is there a need? Do we have opportunities for projects out there? So for me, that's one of the things. But when you look at this chart, it kind of makes us look like everybody's equal. You got the private and the federal, 32.14 million. You got the city of Cincinnati HUD, 108, 34 million. Then you got on our side, 33.5 million. Then you got the city again, 14.9 million. Then the city again, 5 million. Then the VTICA, I don't know what that is, 250 million. What is that?
That's only 250,000 actually. It's a little bit.
You got the M in there.
Confusingly.
You done gave everybody our stuff. Now I'll be honest with you. We done scraped up this 33 million. We got our chest out. Not saying it's gonna end everything, but we feeling good that we did something. And then every time I look up, I got a whole bunch of other people, and they doing this and they doing that. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in this county. We were trying to take a leadership role in partnership with people, but a leadership role in this. And, we're leading one day, and then the other day everybody got an M by their name. So I'm just kind of confused. So you said this is 250,000, but it says 200.
Yeah, that's sort of probably that's the M and MM is like a confusing finance way. They say 1,000 versus million.
Yeah, I got
2 M's is the million.
I got
1
what
M
you're
is
saying, but
yeah.
I'm saying on the other ones you got a comma, so we got to decide which one we're using.
Yeah.
You put 325,000, comma 536. You didn't put M on this page, so I'm just saying when somebody's watching this, you putting these things up. I'm just saying on here you got commas, on the other ones you're using M.
Yeah.
So we got to have some consistency, but I I know that might be a typo, so we'll go from there. But we went from giving you $0 to 33.5 million. And I think we did a good job on some of those. You had the 17 million, everything. But just like yesterday, you said you made an announcement. Was that yesterday or today?
We just this morning had a press release just announcing that the most recent round of awards we had issued, but it was not a press conference or anything like that.
Who are they? Or is it in this report? The recent round? You just had a press conference?
Yes. Well, the details of the round are in the report.
Who got it? I mean, what are the projects? What areas? Is that in here?
The ones that were funded by county money are in here. Yes.
Which ones are they? I missed.
Sure. No. I ran through everything really quickly. If you go on the main page that sort of has all the projects, it's the final 3 there, which were
Final 3.
So
The port home ownership in Lincoln Heights.
I'm looking at the page that has
Says county ARPA leverage city money for the bridge in Evanston, Blair Lofts, and Avondale.
Yeah, we can look at that one too. Yeah,
and
those are
Price Hill?
those are the 3 projects that
Those are three, okay.
also received. This round of funding was primarily city funding, but the county funding was involved in those 3 projects as well, in part because we have been focused on using the county money outside the city of Cincinnati. And so what that did was that allowed those projects that probably wouldn't have been able to happen with city money alone also happen with county money. So it's, again, the sort of the partnership element of the project, the leveraging of dollars together, that allows us to get those additional projects across the finish line.
Okay.
But I take your point about
I'm okay with those, but all I see is we had one press conference standing out here announcing we giving you 33.5 million. Since that time, we're at other events, and it's always, well, somebody else's money first, but y'all just was in the background. Here's a scissor, cut this ribbon. When are we going to get to, if the county gave this much money, when are we going to have what they call first position on a project that we can announce? Because now you're saying our money almost, is running down. And now you're looking at asking us today to figure out, 1, give more money, and then 2, figuring out how we gonna sustain this. Well, I can't sustain nothing that we kind of haven't.
yeah.
I see other press conferences that you're having. I'm not against them. You're doing a great job. But as it relates to me, the county, it's always y'all in to help us get something over the hump. When are we gonna be for 30? I don't want anybody walking around town saying, what have y'all done for affordable
Sure.
housing? And we done put in 33.5 million and nobody knows about it till you come here, and hopefully somebody's watching us on YouTube.
Yeah. I appreciate the point very much, and the part of sort of running through the county project pipeline that I did was those are going to be projects that are only funded by the county. And that's sort of what we're trying to push through is those projects that are outside the city that are going to be funded only by county sources. And hopefully we'll all agree will be good places to have announcements around. So those are in the works right now, but they're not quite ready to be announced yet. And so that's but we have a pipeline of those projects in the works now. And I take very much the point of, focusing on making sure that this investment is recognized and understood and for the impact it's having, because it is an enormous impact. I mean, I take that point, number one. Number two, it is completely accurate to say that I showed all the numbers, of all the stuff, all the funds together and all the impacts together, the $50 million, the 1,500 units. That doesn't happen without the county committing to this process. So while I understand and I understand and appreciate, and we will deliver on announcements that focused on the county's investment, the county can and should say this whole program exists and the impacts, all the impacts exist because
We
of the
don't want to
county's.
say it. We paid you to say it because you got the numbers,
Yeah.
you got the contracts, you know how much money is in it, and I've been seeing stuff. The city of Cincinnati is in the county, so we don't look at it as a separate thing.
Right.
But we're not getting any. You're having press conferences, you're doing stuff. I've seen you're doing great. CDF looks great, but the county is never. We're kind of like the afterthought until you come here and then you say, now it ain't for us to be running around saying it.
Mhm.
That's what we got you to do.
Yeah.
Because I'm not picking the developers and where we're going. We trust in you to do that stuff. So I'm confused how we got into a backseat and not, coming in, like you said, these things couldn't happen without us. It needs to be a true partnership. So that's where I'm talking to you based on our contract, not with somebody. I don't know their contracts. And I'm concerned about that. So I wanted to put that out there. It's not for us to run around and say, we did it. We hiring you. Did we do it? I mean, you need to be saying we did. And be included in that. The other thing that I wanted to say is that, and I'd like to see this, these projects move. LAD project get moving on this thing. This is they brought this before we even picked anybody. They came and testified and showed that they had did a pilot and this and that. So for me, I'm like, this is a great thing. I'd like to see it. I like to see it get moving. My last thing, though, when you talk about 20 years, well, I'll tell you two things. Number one is, and it's not on you, I'm going to tell everybody, I feel that we're losing our architecture. These things that we're putting up now, these, all of these facilities look alike. I mean, that's Chicago. That ain't Cincinnati. Cincinnati was known for our architects. Stuff looks different. Everything we putting up, 20 years from now, it's just like, what is this? That's why people love Over the Rhine is the architecture. So I want to, I don't know if that could be a criteria, but we need to be looking at that. I want to see some architecture. There's some look-alike boxes all over the place. And that's what made Cincinnati so beautiful. It's made our county so beautiful, so unique, because we had architecture. But now everybody's got the same box with the same gray paint, and it's just, I just don't think it's, I don't think it's good for what we're going to want for 20 years from now. Now, the 20-year deal about being affordable, what I don't want to do, we only get a chance one time. I don't think the federal government is going to give us ARPA money again to do what we've been able to do. And if affordable housing is, it's got us in this, we're in a big mess right now with lack of housing, lack of affordable housing. And I'd asked Jeff about, I'm looking at tying the land deeds, because I've been on council and 20 years sounded like a long time. I said, oh, they're going to do it for 20, they're committed for 20 years, and I was super young, and I thought 20 years would be like an eternity. But now here I am 20 years later, and these same people that got affordable, they gut out the tax credits, they gut out what they can get out of the project, and then they flip it, and now what was affordable become $1 million condos. And if we had never, given the initial money to get the infrastructure in place, right, they may not have $1 million condos because they would have to start from scratch. What I don't want to do is, now I understand 20 years, and I hope to be here 20 years from now in terms of living. I don't want to ride by and say, wow, we put $33.5 million for affordable, and all we did was set these folks up to gut out all these tax credits and pull out the tax credits and get the fees and then sell it. And now, wow, these are $1 million, $2 million, by that time, probably $1 billion condos. So I'm trying to tie the deed to where they would have to come back to whoever the government body is or whomever after. I know it's 20 years because of federal law, but I want to make it tied to the deed forever, where they have to go back to whatever entity before flipping it to a, tremendously unaffordable piece of property. So I asked Jeff about that, about trying to put that in some of the language, if possible, on these deals, so we don't just, right now it's affordable housing and, oh man, we ribbon cutting and everything, and in 20 years from now, everybody forget, right? Same people ain't around and some new people come, and next thing you know, it's been sold, it's been flipped, it's now $1 million condos. How do we stop that?
Well, I think it's a really, really good and important question. And it's something that, at the same time that we are, so two things. One is we're engaged in this effort in general with you all. Some of what we're doing is reinvesting in properties that are at that 25, 30-year time period. And we're resetting the clock and adding more time to them. But it is a fact that I think under any circumstances after 20-ish years, these properties will need significant reinvestment. And there is a real risk that has been sort of borne out historically of, if you have permanent affordability, so it's like, the deed says this has to be affordable for ever, or maybe 60 years or something like that. When they get to that 20, 30-year period, they're not making enough money because the rents are being held down to invest in the improvements, and the property starts to deteriorate, and that becomes an enormous, enormous problem. That's why I think that the overall system has set up this cycle where you come back for reinvestment every 20 or 30 years, and you go and get a tax credit, or you go to your government and ask for those funds. I think that is, I can't point you to like an article that says this definitively, but everything I understand about the industry is like that time period has been set up to avoid properties falling into disrepair because they're permanently affordable.
Yeah. But that hasn't worked because that's what we got now. What we have now, what happens is these developers come in, get their fee, they hold the thing and then sell it and then they usually make a profit off of the sale. And the new person comes in, gets some help, but it still becomes $1 million condos. That's the system we already have for 20 years. We've had that system in place. They're not holding rent down to, if you're paying $100 a day, which I'm just throwing that out because that ain't possible. But if you're paying $100 a day, they're not holding it $100 for 20 years. They're holding it to an affordable rate. They're going up, but they're holding to affordable rate. What I don't want is everybody come in, get a fee. Like in here, you said your fee is $1.something million. They get a fee. And then they sell it. I took all my tax credits. I got all my stuff I can get. And now I'm going to resell it. Now the new person comes in and throws everybody out. Right? So what's the purpose of giving this $33.5 million today? Because we're not creating a society of affordable housing. We're only holding it for 20 years.
I think I think we agree 1,000% that the goal here is as much affordability for as long as possible, right? And that ideally we get to a point in this community where people, and I truly pray we get to this point, that everyone who needs housing can find it at the income level they want, right? And that stays the case we are at. I think that is like the commonly shared goal. The thing that we try to reckon with is, one, when we look around the country at how affordable housing works around the country, I think outside of perhaps California, and there isn't anywhere where there is sort of this permanent affordability model because of this reason of disinvestment in the properties. Now, what I think is more likely to happen in that 30-year period is the property was developed as affordable housing. It's operating as affordable housing. It needs reinvestment. The reinvestment is significant that's needed at that moment, 30 years in the future. There hopefully will still be funding sources for people to build affordable housing. There's much less likely to be a bunch of money from the government to fund market rate housing. And so and this is why it becomes an ongoing sort of a cyclical commitment, because 30 years from now, when that project it's going to fall apart, literally, it needs to get reinvested in. The money should only be available to do affordable housing, or the money that would make it realistic would be affordable housing money, not market rate money. But I do think it's something that we can and should and will look into to figure out are there some models that work better than what we've been able to find that could allow that? Because I agree with you that, and in fact, I agree with you, one, that it is a very bad outcome to invest all this money and then have something become market rate housing, in someone's near lifetime. One of the models that we're looking at around the country with some private money is private sources, hopefully, are versions that take projects in that setting, and you have this subsidized private source that then buys it and maintains it as affordable housing, as opposed to buying it and turning it into $1 million condos. Yeah. But it's a similar idea in that you set up a whole affordable housing system that is dealing with the whole life cycle of these properties, so that you have the ability, you have sources that can fund the reinvestment when it's needed, so the properties don't fall into disrepair. Yeah. And
I'm not talking about low-income housing. We're talking about affordable housing, people that's working and they afford to live here. So I want to make that clear, because I know people say, the CMHA, we're not talking about that. But I think I would love for you to look into them paying us back. If you go to non-affordable housing, there's a lien on the property that you refund us what we put in. I think that would be great.
Yeah. We're happy. I mean,
you're a lawyer, I'm sure somebody versus somebody, some case out there.
Yeah.
But we've got to tie to that property lien. We've got to put a lien on these properties or something that we would, it's just like a bank. Bank puts a lien on it and they get the first, when you sell, you got to pay them. But if you go to non-affordable, which fine, you got to pay us back into this fund.
Well, that is definitely the way it's set up right now during the period.
Yeah, only 20 years.
But you're talking about after the period,
Yeah. I thought 20 years was a long time.
Yeah, no, I get that. Ago. I'm with you. I remember meeting you 20 years ago.
Around, so 20 years ain't enough time. We need 50 to 100 years.
Yeah. I know. I hear you. And I think it is something that we were digging into a little bit because of some of these questions, and I think we want to keep digging into it and understand what's the way. I think the sweet spot is figuring out something that is addressing the issue at the tail end, but is also not doing anything to sort of dissuade people at the front end from taking on these dollars and making the investments. And because and particularly as we're trying to sort of convince people to do these projects outside the city, I think we just got to figure out the right mix there. But we will definitely look into it some more.
Thank you. Vice President Driehaus.
Thank you. Thank you, Luke, for the presentation. Couple of questions. So when we did the first tranche of money, I think you very clearly described how that money was being used, the county funds, to fund projects that were already in the pipeline. They'd gotten waylaid by COVID and needed, because of what you had already said to us about the escalating costs, to have some injection of kind of gap funding at the end so that we could move those projects out. And so that was the first tranche of money. So when we talk about the ongoing tranche, or tranches, I guess, of money, how are they being used in a similar way, or can you help us better understand if the model has changed, what it has changed to?
That's a great question. I would say it's a little bit of a mix. There continues to be these sort of like project is stuck, gap financing that needs to be filled, and that's really the three projects that the county funds contributed to and just announced awards are sort of in that category. But we have also, and I think much more of our effort around the county funds is focused on encouraging projects that really, it's sort of the opposite. It's projects that maybe are being conceived of because of the availability of these funds, and making sure that, so opposed to saying a project has been in the works and then all of a sudden, oh, thank God this money showed up and saved us, This is like, I'm going to consider a project I wasn't even thinking about before. And I think in that pipeline that I alluded to, I think all those are projects that are in that category. And those take a little bit longer because they're not, and that's just sort of how we operate. It's not that a developer's been working on a project for 2 years and they've got everything ready and they're just like, look, I'm $1 million short. Like, I got everything. Can you help me? I'm thinking about doing this. I want to pursue this. I'm willing to pursue it as affordable housing. Can you help me figure out how to do that? Can you help us figure out what sources would be available for that? And what are the rules and how does it work? And so that's really a lot of our time now is spent on doing that with projects with the county funds. I think in particular in the prioritized projects category, the disabled and senior housing, that is one where, or not less senior, but disabled and returning citizens. That is one where there isn't a model for how to do that. You know, they're creating it, and organizations are stepping out of their comfort zone to figure out how do I do this, but they're doing it fundamentally in response to the availability of these funds. So it's very much these things wouldn't have even been considered but for the county's commitment of funding. Those do take some time to sort out and that is sort of, again, our role, which is different than a role a government usually can play, because the government has to sort of handle things in a little bit of a more distance and sort of issue an RFP and then don't talk to anybody for a while. We're able to, because of the many different ways we're interacting with these folks, work with them over months to try to figure out what's the best way to make this work. And importantly, help them do it in a way that's going to work for them. It isn't putting them at too much risk. It is very easy for anybody to go, wow, there's free money somewhere. This is great. I'm going to go do this project. And the next thing you know, they've got themselves underwater and they've had to put themselves at significant risk. And it's a completely natural reaction, but it's part of our duty to help guide people sort of down the right path, but in a let's figure this out way. Mm-hmm. And so that is to your point, to your question, that is a lot of what we're doing, and maybe primarily what we're doing right now with the county funding is working with those projects, figuring out how they can work, helping them understand what the rules are going to be, and then helping them introduce them to other potential sources like other loan products we might have or things like that.
Well, that's pretty exciting because it sounds like new communities, new organizations, a new approach to what we've been doing, which is good, right? It's adding more housing units, but that sounds very different from where we've been before. And so that is a pretty exciting scenario, really. And by the way, you know, this idea that we have a fund of funds, I think is exactly what we intended, was to have the city come in, the feds come in, the state come in, the county come in, and private sector come in and leverage, because that's the whole idea here, is to get the biggest bang for the buck for the county. And so I'm grateful that CDF exists in our community so we can use your expertise to help us leverage our own funding with others. So when you talk about the state piece then, and you talked about LIHTC and about the resetting of the rules, do you, in your experience, and Joe in his experience, anticipate that the funding from the state is a stable funding source, while it may vary a little bit by way of qualifications? Mm-hmm. Do you anticipate that ongoing the state will continue to participate in this way to help these deals go?
I think so. I mean, you know.
That's not helpful.
No, I do. I mean, I have joked because you would, you know, both you and Commissioner Reese, with your friends in Columbus, would probably know even better than me. But you know, the federal LIHTC program is like a permanent program. So like, it's not going away. I think that there was a lot of stuff going on at the state the last couple of years around housing policy that I think were some risks and questions. I think where it netted out, though, was not nearly as bad as it could have been. And I think there was this new Ohio LIHTC program, which I think people are optimistic. We're all optimistic that we made permanent. And I think there's a recognition at the state, bipartisan recognition that we have to build more housing. There's certainly a bipartisan recognition in the federal government about that. And so I think for sure that the state, you know, LIHTC program is not going anywhere. And I think that I'm optimistic that the state is going to put even more, at least not dilute, and hopefully put a little more resources into sort of their funding of potential gap resources. And I would say from our side, we are working very hard through this program to sort of establish with the state, hey, we're a reliable partner down here. So if you state want to put money down, we will match it. We're here. We're not going anywhere. We're going to keep working on this. And I think we've, to the extent you can, we've built a pretty good relationship with the OFA staff pretty quickly around that. And I'm excited what that could lead to over time.
So we're looking forward to the housing committee at the state level releasing their report, right? Because they were down here, you guys testified. Bill Blessing is on that committee, so that's a good thing for us because he represents an area down here on the west side. So I am hopeful too that you do wonder if the state's going to do more. Having served at the state level, I don't remember, we talked about housing way back when I was there, but we didn't have the resources to do anything. That has changed. And I also have heard the lieutenant governor in particular talk about housing needs because of some of these big corporations, Intel in particular, coming to Ohio. And you can't have workers come to Ohio without places to house them. No. And so I do think in a bipartisan way, everybody has started to talk about housing. I think we are at an advantage by having CDF in our community, unlike other communities, where they can say, oh, here's a trusted partner. We don't have to worry about what happens to the funding once we invest it with CDF. We know it's being well cared for and being leveraged with local. So I'm hopeful that there's some maybe even recognition of that in the report. So we'll look forward to that coming forward. Two other things. One, let's stay on funding then, because my last one's a little bit easier. This idea that we three commissioners set housing as our top priority when it came to ARPA, and the funding reflects that. And so, once this money runs out, we all knew it was one-time funding, but the need will persist. I mean, the numbers don't stack up, right? We didn't create 30,000 units. We created some units and less than 30,000. And so, and it's not for today, but I do want to continue to think about, do we as a county start to think through an ongoing funding source if it remains a top priority for the commission? What is available to us? I have talked a little bit to Jeff about this. We need to continue, I think, to build on this commitment that we've made. And I know the city is sorting through that as well. So I just, and your expertise, I think, would be helpful in thinking through what other communities are doing, what other counties are doing by way of housing, and how we sustain the effort, albeit at a lower degree. I mean, we're not going to find 33 million sitting around, but maybe an ongoing funding source. So I, for one, am interested in looking into that, using you and your knowledge base to help us ascertain what the options are.
Well, I appreciate all that, and that's right on. And I think that even, part of why this investment you all made was so incredibly catalytic, truly, was that it sort of like it gave this idea a chance, right? And it gave it a chance at enough of a scale to really show it could work. And I think what we have always taken as part of our duty is like showing this works, and then saying to everybody, okay, like what's the answer to keeping this going? Mm-hmm. And even if it's not going to be, of course, it's not going to be $33 million. But I will say any recurring revenue stream has enormous impacts because, again, it allows you to plan and us to sort of make sort of like ongoing decisions, and it gives people certainty for those developers, like in the multi-year cycle. If they know, okay, there's going to be some money every year, I'll put in the year and a half to put this project together because I have faith there's going to be a possibility, not a guarantee, but that I could access these funds later. And that has the recurring element has an enormously positive impact. And we are
gives you the opportunity to talk to some of these new folks in new areas and say, yes, the expectation is we will be able to fund something here in the future. Yeah,
this is not going away. We're going to be here.
Even if it's not in round 3, maybe it's in round 4. Right. And so lastly, you mentioned this, you just touched on it, this idea that some of the jurisdictions in the county are less situated, right? They're not well situated to take advantage of some of the funding that comes to. We see this play out in a number of different ways by way of our grants. And we are trying to build capacity, especially I think there are 7 jurisdictions that have been identified. I'm wondering, and I just want to throw this idea out there. We've talked before about a countywide CDC that is not specific to one location, but rather specific to the expertise they have to help build the capacity in certain jurisdictions. So, Walnut Hills has a great CDC. Price Hill has a great CDC. We have them all over the city. We don't have that model in other parts of the county.
Right.
And so establishing a CDC that is able to and be flexible enough to move around to some of these jurisdictions that otherwise are never going to see any of this development, any of these resources, because they don't have the capacity to ask or to apply or to do that in a meaningful way, right? And so just trying to think through some of the funding that is out there for capacity building. I just want to throw that out because we've heard this over and over again. And I think some of the communities that need it the most are never going to get it because they don't have the capacity to ask. And they don't have the manpower to do it, or woman power to do it, I should say. So anyway, I just want to throw that out because it's just nags me whenever I hear that communities don't have the capacity. It's like, oh, why don't we establish the capacity to help them be more successful? So I just want to throw that out. I've talked to Jeff about this a number of times too. So just an idea.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Dumas.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. A few questions. And when you talk about the capacity, I wanted to kind of say a little bit about that because I heard you say, I was in a meeting at the port, and the port was saying as far as land in Lincoln Heights, there's no land in Lincoln Heights to build, and I explained to them where there is some land that I know there is. And so having that capacity and whether or not the community wants affordable housing, I'll answer for all the communities. Yes, I'm answering for them, and they do want it, and we need to reach out and talk to them about that. But I'm going to move on. Affordable housing is just a big word now for every part of the county, the city, the nation. And so I think about how does affordable housing benefit people? And so, of course, it benefits the people, it benefits the government, and it benefits whoever has the opportunity to build that affordable housing. But other than that, that whole concept that affordable housing is a priority, we have to get to that point some way. And people are not seeing it as something that is a priority. When I say people, I'm thinking about developers other than making the money to develop. So that whole concept, that's near and dear to our hearts. Affordable housing is so extreme to people just progressing and becoming individuals and doing well in society. I'll leave it at that. But when you talked about the 45% increase in construction costs, that hit me hard. We knew that materials were going up, but construction costs, 45%. And I'm thinking we need to talk to our lobbyists in the state, and if they're all for affordable housing, and I don't know if you've already told them the 45% increase in construction, then our lobbyists need to be doing that and talking to those in Columbus and also the national level that if you're so into affordable housing, the money needs to be there. And you were saying, I think the state, well, when you hit them with this, I would think that they would be more excited about doing it, and they'll funnel the money in order to do that. I got all these things on my sheet, so I'm trying to follow it. Vitica, who can you say in two sentences what they are again?
Yes, and I want to apologize for it because I was part of its creation when I was working at City Hall. It is it stands for Voluntary Tax Increment Contribution Agreement.
Okay.
And it is, in essence, the city's tax abatement policy. When they issue tax abatement, the developer agrees to pay a portion of the value of that tax abatement into a couple different sources. And one of them is if it's in the streetcar line downtown over the Rhine, it goes to the streetcar operations. If it's outside of that, a portion of it comes into affordable housing. And so that is something that now Home Base, which is the CDC association organization, they actually collect those funds from developers. So basically, a developer gets a 50% tax abatement. 15% of that money they got to pay over to Home Base, and then Home Base sends that to us, and then that becomes this and it's dedicated for affordable housing. So that becomes, it's another revenue stream that's sort of a byproduct of the city's tax abatement policy. It's a horribly named thing that we made up that name as a placeholder, and then no one ever fixed it. So we're stuck with it.
All right, thank you for that. I know initially when we met about 6 months ago, and I immediately looked at who was going to be receiving the rental and the renovation and new housing, and I immediately said, what about the suburb? I hear you saying about reaching out beyond that, and so I'm looking at your map, if you could put that up for me. And so the number of average, this is what I need from you, for me anyway, is I kind of want to go a little deeper.
Okay.
And so when you look at the rental housing projects, which are primarily, as you said, downtown area, what the average rental cost is for that area. What do you think it'll be for those specific projects?
Do you mean what the rent that will be charged?
Sure. So it's dependent on each individual?
Yeah, so the basic way that it's set up is that for each project there'll be, and it's actually Commissioner Reese in the deed restriction, it will say you need to, that you've agreed to have this many units rented to people at these area median income levels. And then the rent is something that's published by HUD for that area median income level, and it's meant to reflect the relationship between 30% of that person's, no more than 30% of that person's income being spent on housing. So that's sort of how they tie everything together. The actual like amounts come from HUD, and then and usually most of these, as the statistics showed, are at 60% of the area median income or below, but not all of them. So anyway, it gets really.
They can't go
wonky.
beyond that, right?
Right. They have to set the rents at that level, yeah, and then they have to verify the income of the person who comes in, that they're actually at that income level.
So for the housing, the for sale housing, which is predominantly outside of the Cincinnati area, how does that work? Same way?
Same idea, but the level there is at 80% of the area median income, and that sort of comes from the ARPA eligibility rules. And I think the reason that number is higher is that I think there's when you get a lot further below that, it's hard for an income level to sort of have the money for the down payment, although there are down payment assistance programs, but there are a little more of, just to make it sort of good for that owner, they usually set it at 80% AMI level as opposed to 60% AMI level for housing ownership.
So it looks to me on this map that we need to increase our affordable rent in the suburban, our outskirts area, because most of it was the housing.
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
That's a big priority of ours.
Okay, I think that's all I have. Let's see. Can I just take a second and look at my scribble? Yeah. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, one other thing. We have about 8 million left over. So you technically don't have to come back to get approval. We've approved the amount that we have committed to you guys, but it will be very hard for me to approve the 8 million if it's not going toward the outskirts of Cincinnati. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Understood.
That's all I have.
That's all you got?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, Mr. No, go ahead, Mr. Ludo.
So just a couple of things, Commissioner. One actual question, Luke, and I'll keep it really short. But as you guys are looking at this long-term, just in terms of the efficacy of, I think we can all agree that the use of the dollars in this way, as the county has provided it and as these other sources have provided it, puts us in a much better position than we've ever been to efficiently fund affordable housing development. So I know it's probably not the top thing on your guys' radar, but I'm just wondering, especially as we get into the role of justifying the use of ARPA funds, et cetera, it would be, and I'm sure you guys are thinking about it, how we can show that these dollars have enabled a production level of affordable housing in this community at a rate that we haven't been able to do before given traditional sources. So happy to work with you together on that, but just I figure it's something you guys are working on in terms of evaluating the program you're implementing. But I know right now you're running so fast trying to implement, sometimes that gets pushed to the side. So I just didn't want to lose sight of that I would certainly enjoy the chance to work with you guys on that, because we'll be asked to report back on this as well. So that was just one question, but that's maybe for a parking lot for a later time. I just wanted to follow up more just to, I think there's a lot of policy questions that came out of the discussion today that I'll be working with Holly on making sure that we're following up for the board. So just the items I have here in no particular order are the policy question of how we go about ensuring longer term affordability periods on projects, recognizing that there may be implications on that for, as Lucas, I think I heard you say, for long-term maintenance or for upfront subsidies that may be required. So what are policy options for the board to assure that, and how there may even be conversations going on at the state and federal level as it relates to that? That's something we'll look to follow up with you as well. The question of county ongoing funding and sustainability, we will certainly be having conversations about that. I think the voluntary tax incentive agreement, I know that's been something, commissioners, that we've looked at in the past as it relates to funding some of these types, whether it is affordable housing or whether it's other policy priorities of the board that we've looked at in the context of our enterprise zones and other incentives. I'll have to go back and see what we determined on that, whether there were some limitations placed on the county because of the nature of our incentives being prescribed in the ORC versus what the city has. But we'll go back and dust that off. That may provide some policy choices for the board as well. And finally, the question of the efforts in the suburban areas as well. To Commissioner Summer Dumas's point, we will follow up on that. And then finally, just on the marketing, we'll follow up with you all from a marketing perspective just to get a better sense as to opportunities for direct media announcements, press conferences. I know you guys have been really good about reaching out and getting quotes from the county and the board on press releases that you're putting out, et cetera. So thank you for that. But we'll have Bridget reach out just to find out if there's opportunities for specific press conferences, et cetera. So those were just some of the things, commissioners, I have for the administration to follow up on. I think there was a lot that came out of this discussion. So if there's other things, we can follow up with board offices to get some instruction there as well.
That'll be good. I think at some point we talked about this interactive map. I know planning is working on, and we have partners like CDF, but then we got CDBG. There's a lot of things that are moving parts that we are investing in affordable housing. And I think having something presented to us in a holistic way, like here is the map, all of it. It's CDF's part, what we're doing with our CDBG dollars and others, what we're doing with the port, other stuff, land bank. Here is what Hamilton County looks like. I know we still have a ways to go, but I do think we've made some progress. And I just think having that interactive map that an average citizen can go there, once we put it out there, they could go there and we have a number. So it's 700 units here, but then whatever, how many units there, and then how many units is this? So we can kind of get our hands around, here's kind of a snapshot of it.
And I know we've talked about that before, and I will follow up and I think I owed you a follow up on that to all three of you on the status of that map and how we integrate this into it. So I'll certainly do that. And to just while I've got you here, Luke, I know that from Joe to you, this is a huge, heavy lift in your organization. Just want to thank you. I know on behalf of Holly, who works with you guys all the time on a more of a day-to-day basis. But just thanks for thanks for what you're doing on this. This is hopefully a model that other communities can take advantage of as well. So just thanks to you and the organization for your effort on it.
Well, thank you, Jeff. I will just add to that. We actually have gotten inquiries from other places like, how did you guys do this? Like, and Commissioner Reese, to your point, it's not to the world, but we say to them, our government's got serious, right? The county got serious, and they made an enormous investment. And that's what, everything else followed from that. And so but that kind of discussion is happening. And I think, I think we are really collectively at the forefront of something exciting here. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Luke.
Thank you.
Good to see you again. Thank you. And Regina, thank you for being here as well. You're still here for the next one? Okay. Regina's gonna stay with us. Okay, great. Item number 2 is Lead Safe Ohio and the Hamilton County Home Repair Program.
And Commissioners, we have Kristen Baker from LISC.
Yes.
We're just talking about LISC, but this is an update on the Lead Safe Ohio program. As you know, there were state funds available for the abatement of lead in residential homes. We're partnering with LISC to help implement this for us. So we're going to turn it over to Kristen. Also, just want to thank Anson Turley and the administration for all of his efforts on this project as well.
Awesome. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I apologize. I have laryngitis, so this will be painful for you to listen to, but I have lots of information on the slides. So thank you, Commission President and Commissioners, for having us today. Today I'm going to talk actually about 2 programs to benefit homeowners that LISC is facilitating on behalf of Hamilton County. That is the Lead Safe Hamilton County program and our home repair loan program. That is also a combination of American Rescue Act funds and CDBG. So I'm going to touch on that so you can see sort of the holistic view of the support we're going to be leveraging for homeowners. First, just a frame for why these programs are really important here in Hamilton County, which you all know well. One, we have an aging housing stock. We have 23% of our owner-occupied housing in the county was built before 1930, and a significant amount was built before 1978. In addition to that, so as you can see, 1961 is the median age. This means that these properties need some help. They need some investment, and also, particularly with respect to lead safe, they are also places that likely have had some kind of lead paint used in the property. We also have 203,000 units in Hamilton County that are homeowner occupied. That's a significant amount of our housing, almost 60%. But we will also note that only 15% of this is of our homeowners are Black or African American, and it's an important part of our homeownership journey to make sure we support existing homeowners, particularly homeowners that have had structural barriers to becoming homeowners. And also about 38,000 of our homeowners in the county, almost 20%, are considered cost burdened, meaning the cost of their housing is more than 30% of their monthly earnings or the monthly income. So that means they're probably more challenged to be able to actually make repairs to their property when needed. So as I mentioned, we have 2 new tools that we are partnering with the county on to support homeowners in Hamilton County, totaling $9 million. First, on the left here is the Home Repair Loan Program. I'm not going to go into a lot of depth on this today because, as you know, we're still ironing out the final details of our agreement with the county on this, but wanted you to have a preview of how this is shaping up. Essentially, it's up to $25,000 in loan capital for a homeowner, and these are really for homeowners that aren't eligible for grant-funded home repair programs. So they make too much money to be eligible for a program that might be able to make repairs for them on a grant basis, but they aren't necessarily financially able to go to the bank and secure a loan or a home equity line. So we're really filling a gap here. And we're leveraging public dollars one-to-one with private dollars. So LISC has secured $1 million in what's called a program-related investment. This is essentially money that a foundation will make a loan toward an entity like LISC or like CDF to allow us to use this as loan capital. And Cincinnati Development Fund, our local partners here, have also come to the table with $1 million investment in this program as well. So we're happy to have that. And then on the right, which you can't quite see on the big slides, but the Lead Safe Ohio program, which is what I'm going to talk about next, which is grant funds for homeowners to provide lead-safe renovations, which I will get into what that means because it's an important, I've learned a lot about lead in the last 9 months, and it's an important distinction to understand the difference between lead-safe renovations and lead abatement. And that's $5.3 million that the state has provided to Hamilton County, for which LISC will be administering the program. This is part of the state's American Rescue Act fund priorities. The governor signed this into law last year. And again, Hamilton County's money award is 5316, and that is based on, again, the age of the housing stock, the population of the county, and other factors. So we are among the largest awardees around the state, as you would expect. The goal of the program is to create lead-safe homes for more of Ohio's children and families. I will point out the really exciting part of this program is that we don't have to have children living in the home for a homeowner to be able to participate. This is really about investing in the future of our housing stock. So even if a child isn't here now, we want to make it lead safe for the next, potentially the next occupants as well. I'm going to just share a little chart of the sort of the infrastructure of who all is at the table to help us run and manage this program. Liska serving as the program administrator. We are managing the funds, managing the reporting to Ohio Department of Development, who is administering this program on behalf of the state, working on promoting the program, making sure we have enough contractors to perform this work, and of course, all of the monitoring and compliance. A homeowner will work with Working in Neighborhoods, which is one of the 2 HUD-certified housing counseling agencies that we have in Hamilton County right now, to qualify the homeowner. So they will determine their income eligibility, the age of the home, etc., to determine that the homeowner is eligible. And they will also refer homeowners to other services that they might need, which is really important because what we expect to see is that some of our homeowners might not have title to their home, right? It might have been grandma's house, it was passed down. How do we clean that up? How do we make sure that homeowners are getting all the wraparound services that they might need to benefit from being a homeowner and to be sure that they are able to transfer that wealth on to the next generation? The construction, once a homeowner is qualified for the program, our partners, Habitat for Humanity, will step in the construction management role. So they will visit the home with the homeowner. They will create the scope of work. They will then put that work out to the contractor pool that we are working to cultivate with Habitat and select the contractor to perform the work that is required. And then they will manage that work for the homeowner all the way through with the contractor, which I think is really important too, because if you've ever tried to do some work on your house in the last couple of years, finding a contractor that'll actually show up and finish the work is tough right now. So this is an important aspect of this program that I think is really valuable to homeowners. And then because this is about making sure that we're containing lead paint in the home, Hamilton County Public Health plays a really important role here. We're contracting with them to provide the lead clearances that are required to make sure that the work has been performed safely and adequately. So in terms of homeowners are eligible, the state criteria, and I want to be clear that these are the state's criteria. We do not have the option to really flex these. We do have some options to support homeowners who might miss a few of these qualifications that I don't want to get into a lot of the weeds on that, but we're going to work to be as flexible as we can, and I want to commend the state as well for their understanding that none of this is easy when we're dealing with homeowners that we really want to support. So the program is as such. This is for owner-occupied single-family residential dwellings, so 1 to 4 units. So a homeowner could live in one half and of a duplex, and then we could provide services to the other part of the property should that be necessary. Though we don't have a lot of that in the county, but there is some. The property must be built before 1978 and located in Hamilton County. So this is also available to City of Cincinnati residents. That's the administration and the City of Cincinnati negotiated as well. We're going to really focus our outreach in the parts of the county that are not included in the City of Cincinnati. I do want to make that clear. The priority for this in terms of household income is 80% of area median income. I just added the chart here just for your reference because I think it's always helpful to understand what those amounts look like. We can look at households over 80% of area median income if they meet certain criteria, but again, we're really going to focus on trying to support homeowners that are at or below that income threshold. So what are lead-safe renovations? This is really an important part of this work. You think about where lead paint might chip away. It's around windows and doors, right, where there's places where there's friction. So this program will allow us to provide window and door replacement. We can enclose the exterior with siding if that's necessary to contain the paint. We're not doing abatement. I want to reiterate that again. Abatement is complete removal of lead from the property. That is not what this program is. This is about minimizing the risk and containing it. So we could do a lot of exterior work. As you can see here, we can do interior and exterior painting. There are also some, the state has been very flexible and generous with some additional supportive measures that could be available to a property. So for instance, if Habitat gets out to Mrs. Jones's home and we find that the roof is really deteriorated, we could replace the roof for this homeowner as part of this program, because that would allow us to preserve the investment of the lead safe renovations that we're making. We don't want to put new windows in and then have water damage immediately, or put siding up and have it be immediately damaged. So this is going to give us a lot of flexibility to really make positive investments for our homeowners at 80% AMI or below through this program. A big part of this also, and part of the state's priority, is really around building that pipeline of contractors who can perform lead-safe work. So the state has provided at no cost to Hamilton County the availability of training, a certification that is required for contractors who perform this work called RRP certification, renovation, repair, and painting. So we actually just had our first training of 10 contractors here 2 weeks ago. It's a photo from this training. These are contractors here in Hamilton County that are performing this work. And this will really allow, we also have worked very closely with Assistant Administrator Turley and partners in the county to make sure that we're accessing the list of bold contractors through your directory. So Habitat's already reached out to a number of those contractors, and they are moving through the process of becoming contractors for this program, which I think is a really great benefit. We're going to continue to help provide opportunities for contractors to build their pipeline of work and grow here in the county. And we can run those trainings as frequently as we need. We anticipate doing probably at least 5 or 6 a year for the next 2 years. So in terms of timeline, this is a very simplified timeline, but we are going to launch this program in May. We are working with Regina Russo and Right Now Communications to help us with our communications plan. So we would love to, and working with Bridget Doherty and others to make sure that we're putting together an event and an opportunity for the county to really highlight this investment and launch this program so homeowners are aware of how they qualify and how do they learn more. We have to have all of the work on the homes completed by February of 2026. This is ARPA money, but the state has compressed the timeline a little bit, I think, to make sure that they can reallocate funds if needed. So we have to complete all of our work by April of 2026 at this time. And we will be launching a website with information for homeowners, working, of course, very closely with community-based partners. The library has come to the table and indicated they'd be happy to help work with us. Of course, we want to partner with the 513 Relief Bus, and Anson has started those conversations with us as well as you're out in the community, making sure homeowners are aware. 211 is also an important partner to us in this work. So we will be able to service probably at least 150 homeowners, if not more. We have to wait and see what the projects look like in terms of the amount of investment that's required, but we really anticipate this is going to be a tremendous opportunity to support the housing stock here in Hamilton County and help our homeowners now. Okay. I'm sorry, I know I sound terrible. I'm going to move to the loan program very quickly. As I think you all are aware, and we've talked about this a little bit, or at least I know the administration has talked with you all about this in depth, what the priority of this home repair loan program is, and it really is to help reinvest in our homeowners here in Hamilton County, particularly those that are just, as I mentioned, not able to access grant-funded repair programs, but also can't necessarily go to the bank. It's really about helping to preserve our housing stock, build generational wealth, and again, bringing in private money to match with the public dollars to really stretch the investment. There's a lot of overlap in terms of eligibility for this program with Lead Safe Ohio. So, and in concept, a homeowner could receive both programs should they be eligible, but there's a little bit of complexity with that, so we're going to work through that together. The eligible homeowner, again, single-family, owner-occupied home. They need to be current on their property taxes or be on a payment plan. They have to be able to demonstrate proof of residency, as I mentioned, and have homeowners insurance, or we will work with them to help them secure homeowners insurance if they do not have it. And I do want to point out, this is a loan, right? So that does mean we have to be able to determine the homeowner's ability to repay. But our goal here is really to have a very flexible underwriting program. So our minimum credit score is 560, which is far below what a traditional bank would be able to offer. In terms of where houses can be located, or who is eligible, one, if the house is located in a qualified census tract, the homeowner's income is not a factor. If you're in a QCT, you are eligible regardless. If not, you do have to meet an income eligibility of 80% AMI or below, so the same eligibility as let's say, Ohio. What are the priorities for the repairs for this program? That one, of course, health and safety hazards, making sure that the home is accessible to the homeowner. You think about aging in place, other opportunities, what kind of repairs can we make, replacing HVAC systems, etc. Repairs that address, and this is really, I think, important, particularly in our county communities, our cities, villages, and townships, is helping homeowners who have code violations. The city of Cincinnati has some tools at their disposal to help homeowners with code violations. We know some of our county communities are, the finances just don't allow for that, right? So this is really a way for us to help, I think, support a lot of our municipalities in this way. And then third is really general improvements. Nothing's only about cosmetic, but really how do we upgrade the home to make sure that it has a lasting ability to sustain the household. In terms of what the loan product looks like for the homeowner, there will be an interest rate of 3% or less. We're still hammering out, again, all of this is still in flux with some of our final pieces that we need to get in place. It's a long loan term, so up to $25,000 for 7 to 10 years, which means the homeowner's payment is really going to be hopefully something that fits in their budget, and our partners will work to make sure of that. We're not going to just give someone a $25,000 loan because they've asked for it. We want to size it appropriately to their ability to repay. We're not requiring an appraisal. As part of the loan, we will be escrowing their property taxes and their insurance payments to really help them stay on top of that, and a very small a good faith closing payment from the homeowner. And then you could see on the right side here the sort of what the profile of the borrower looks like in terms of the credit score, the loan to value. So how much is their property worth, and how much can they pay back in terms of their ability to repay, etc. So, and I want to point out, LISC is not a consumer lender, and so we have partnered with Warsaw Federal. So Warsaw Federal will be issuing the loans to the homeowners, and as I think we all know, they're very experienced in this space and will be a great partner to our community members. Other key partners to this program are, again, thinking about outreach. How do we get to homeowners? How do we help homeowners understand that this is an important opportunity for them? Again, the 513 Relief Bus, our faith-based partners, the library, United Way plays an important role again here. And then the same partners that you saw for Lead Safe are the same partners that are going to be working with homeowners in this program. So working in neighborhoods, Habitat for Humanity, again, with that addition of Warsaw Federal, who will be servicing those loans for the period of the term for the homeowners. That's me. I talked really fast. Like I said, I wasn't going to get into all the weeds on everything. I'm happy to answer questions that you might have. I just want to say that I think this is a really tremendous moment for homeowners in Hamilton County. These are resources that $9 million for homeowners is really something that we're proud to be able to partner with you on and really deliver on your behalf. And I think that we're going to really be able to see some tremendous impacts in parts of the county that often might feel overlooked or not able to access resources. So we're really excited to get out there and hit the streets and start talking to homeowners soon. So questions, please.
Well, thank you. Thank you for coming. I know
Happy to
that's
be here.
tough for your throat.
Yeah, sorry.
So I'm not going to ask you a whole bunch of questions, but even just going through it, because we got our pack and we're having some technical difficulties here ourselves. So there's a lot out there, and that's great. Question is, it gets a little confusing because we've got a home repair program and you've got one, you've got a couple. So I just, maybe this question may be for Mr. Ludo, but I would like to see, just from a marketing standpoint, it's kind of like when COVID first hit, we had all of this. I mean, people are like, man, I'm overwhelmed. Where do I go? Who do I go to? And we created this portal, 513relief.org, that kind of got you right to the point. And then, of course, we've got the bus. You can talk to somebody directly. So I'm glad to see the 513 Relief Bus. But I was just wondering if some way we can work together to really, because we've got Council on Aging has a repair program, even if you're not a senior citizen. But then they have one for a senior citizen, and you have a loan program and then a grant program. And so for me, I just feel like besides 211, because everybody, I mean, it's a bunch of stuff going to 211, but I wish it was some way that we could develop a hotline that can filter into something to help the person in an interface with the technology. I know you're going to do your own website, but is there some interfacing that for the person that's out there, they only hear like Hamilton County, they don't know is it LISC? Is it this group? Is it that group? How to help them navigate at the beginning.
Yeah, no, great question, Commissioner, because especially with all the federal funding that's out there, we have a lot of programs going on right now.
Yeah.
We've got some through levy funds, through ARPA, et cetera. So we've tried our best to consolidate where we can. So for instance, as Kristen just went through, the Lead Safe program and the home repair program, we have both under LISC so that they can develop some efficiencies in that. But even with that, there are still some silos of programming, as you mentioned. So we actually do have community planning that is pulling together a more seamless portal for this, so that someone can just, who has the need, can go somewhere, whether it's a website, phone number, et cetera, and then we can, behind the scenes, figure out how to route them to these various programs. So we're working on that right now, because you're right, absent that, it would be a nightmare trying to figure out which program do I go to. So we are working on that, and we'll get back to you on it.
I think it's fantastic. I just think that we need to, from the marketing, everything from how we market it out there, just from our perspective as a county, to how the user gets it, and particularly we talking about some of the older folks too. But I just think that we have some great stuff, but it can get a little complicated if you don't, you don't know if you meet this threshold, that threshold, how do you do it? Just something that will simplify it. So you're already working on it, and I think it's phenomenal. And when we make, you said they were working on an event to have an announcement and all that, I would hope we have those kinks worked out so we can kind of put out, here's the one number or the one button to push to get to it.
And I thank you, Commission President. And I think that we at LISC, of course, have worked really hard in the housing space to bring folks together to talk about all of that as well. We've convened all of the home repair partner providers last year to have this conversation about, to your point, right, of like, how do we make sure that we're really getting the right homeowner to the right program that's the best fit for their needs. So that work is ongoing. It's always complicated, to the administrator's point, of the different funding sources and the requirements, but I think that our ecosystem is working hard to solve for that. And I think what I would say is, if a homeowner isn't sure if they're eligible, just call us, and we will step you, working in neighborhoods, we'll step you through that, right? And they will get you to the right place. Even if our program isn't the right fit for you, those partners will refer out as well. So we really want to be intentional about that and making sure that, to your point, no one feels left behind or too confused, which is why we're trying to simplify the messaging for this, for who's qualified, because it's just better if we could sit down and talk with you and understand you and your situation as a homeowner to make sure we get you to the right place.
Gotcha. Yeah, and it's not, like I said, it's not just you. We just, earlier today, someone came up here angry about their gas and electric bill and demanding to speak to me. I mean, but then we got them to somebody to talk to, and then they weren't as angry. So I'm just thinking, from our perspective, you do this all the time, but from our perspective as a county, this portal has really helped us. One, we can track, and then two, we're trying to get people that have never accessed help. And there's people who need help who've never accessed help before. And if you have never done it, you're not in the in group. You're not the one that, is at the housing stuff all the time and all that. You just been paying your taxes forever, and you're hearing about all these programs, and how do I connect to it? Yep. And I don't want to run them away either, because it's just like, sometimes people go to the doctor and they give you 35 questions. I came here for this, not for this. You know what I'm saying? So I want to engage people who may have never engaged, because this is phenomenal. Like you said, this is a game changer, what you guys are doing and bringing. My last thing, invest in neighborhood, is that countywide?
Invest in neighborhoods? No, Invest in Neighborhoods is the city's sort of network of their community councils working in neighborhoods. Working in neighborhoods works countywide. Yes, they do.
Okay,
Yep.
okay, that's where I got it confused. Okay, all right. Vice President Treehouse.
Thank you for the presentation. Just a couple quick questions. So did you say the total was 9 million?
Between the two programs, yes, it's 9 million.
And so the Lead Safe is the grant program. The other one's a loan program.
Correct.
So how much was allocated for each of these?
So $5,316,000 is the Lead Safe Ohio award from the state of Ohio Department of Development. Mm-hmm. Hamilton County is awarding LISC $2 million for the loan program. 1.3 million of that is your American Rescue Act funds. 700,000 of that is community development block grant funds.
Okay.
And then LISC is bringing $2 million additional to the table for that program in loan capital.
Okay. So the grant funding that's coming down from the state, is the city getting grant funding as well, or is this entirely outside the city, or does this include the city?
So Lead Safe includes the city. The city had the, now we're getting into the weeds here. The city had the option, they were allocated a portion of the $5 million. They could choose to take as much of it as they wanted. The city took, it took about $2 million that the City of Cincinnati Health Department is administering, but they didn't feel that they could take the full amount that they could have taken. So that left more for the county to receive and manage on your behalf. So we're partnering with the City Health Department as well. And I think the City Health Department's intent is maybe to focus in a few neighborhoods in the city, Price Hill, the Price Hill neighborhoods, and a few others. But we're all still getting our agreements inked with the state, et cetera, right? So there's still a lot to work out, but we are coordinating together so that we can make sure that we stretch these dollars as far as we can. And as I mentioned, really our intent, well, we can't exclude anyone who comes and who is eligible. Our outreach, our community, our door knocking, the places where we want to be are going to be the cities, villages, and townships in the county. That's really where we're going to focus a lot of our outreach to make sure that we're reaching homeowners in the county. But of course, city residents are eligible as well, and we'd be happy to service them through this program. The loan program will be focused in county jurisdictions, not the city at this time.
Yeah, okay. It's just hard to distinguish these two things when they're part of the same presentation.
I
But I appreciate the continuity that this provides, right, for both of them. Because if somebody's not eligible for one, perhaps the other, and you can move people back and forth. Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Dumas.
Thank you for your presentation and your fortitude. I appreciate that. Jeff, are we funding any other entity for lead safe efforts? Is this the only entity that we're
So
funding?
we're working directly through LISC, and then LISC is contracting with WIN and with Habitat for Humanity for the different elements of the program.
Okay, so this is the only one. Okay. Just inquisitive about a few things. You were saying children do not have to be a part of the household. Has that changed? I thought years ago you had to have children in the home.
Well, thank you, Commissioner, for the question. It's a great one. This program is unique in that way, right? Because our typical lead abatement programs that Hamilton County Public Health or the City Health Department administer do require children to be in the home a certain number of hours per month, right? And so when the state created this Lead Safe Ohio program with the American Rescue Act funds, they wanted to build sort of a little more opportunity for homeowners to participate who don't have a child in the home, but we want to contain that lead paint, right? So that if they, I'm a mom, I'm not a grandma, but if I'm a grandma someday, right, like I want my lead paint contained, and know that my house will be safe for my future visitors or when I sell it. So they're really trying to offer a lot more flexibility with this, because again, since it's not abatement, it's a lower touch effort. It can allow us to reach more homeowners that way.
Great, I think that's a great idea. And then Warsaw Federal for the loan, how did you, just quickly, how did you choose them versus another financial?
So we did do a competitive selection process, issued an RFP for all of the components of all of these programs, per the funding source requirements, and Warsaw applied, and we feel that we talked to a lot of other financial institutions. I will say the larger banks managing this kind of program, loan program, is tough, right? Because the size of the loans are smaller. It still requires a lot of follow up and work through. And Warsaw is just the right size local institution that really cares about their right. We'll be able to talk to the loan officer directly, right? And with their status as minority depository institution, we also just felt like that was a win-win in terms of having them hold these loans on their books, and really help to grow their profile.
Okay, thank you so much. And finally, the criteria. I think it's great that you're saying you want to reach 150 homeowners, and I think that's great. The criteria seems a little stiff. I mean, you have to have your current mortgage paid, your current property tax, unless you have on a payment plan, 560 credit rating, and I'm just wondering, so your committee list, your board decided that was the best criteria to use? Yeah.
So thank you for the question. So this is the loan program is one that LISC actually operates in other markets around the country. We're a national community development financial institution. We work in 38 cities around the country. And we've been operating this program in the city of Detroit for the last 8 years. And so we learned a lot of lessons through that program, and these are kind of the parameters that they found through trial and error in working with homeowners in Detroit that really make the most sense, because we really have, I think their default rate on these loans is like 1%, and generally that's when someone passes away. It's not because they can't repay, right? So there is a methodology to determining sort of the eligibility, because again, my concern is I don't want to burden a homeowner with a loan who's then going to not be able to repay, right? And we're not putting a lien on the property, right? There's no intent for anyone to sort of disrupt home ownership, right, for people who participate in the program. But we also can, really, again, we have to look at the homeowner. So every homeowner will come in with their own unique criteria, right? And so if you maybe miss on a couple of these things, we're still going to work to find a way to work with you. It's just these are sort of the criteria that we established as the baseline, and it'll be a case-by-case basis as we go forward.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. That's all I have.
All right, before you end, please give your telephone number out.
My telephone number.
So who do you want them to call?
Well, so we are not ready to launch the program yet.
Okay.
But you will likely be helping us launch the program, I hope very soon, but we will have it on our website, and homeowners will be able to reach out to us. You'll see it everywhere very soon, I'm sure.
Awesome. Thank you. Hope you feel better.
Thank you.
Get some hot
so much.
tea,
Yes,
lemon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, next presentation. Overview of the Hamilton County Community Development Action Plan. Maria Collins, Community Development Administrator.
Yes.
Welcome back.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm going to try to get through this as quickly as possible, but be very clear and concise. So each year, HUD requires that the county submits an action plan for its annual entitlements of block grants, home funds, and emergency solution grants. We are in the process, community development is in the process of drafting the annual action plan for program year 2024, which requires citizen participation. And at the end of this process, I will be asking the board's consideration of our 2024 annual action plan. So I wanted to take today to give you an overview of our of that 2024 annual action plan before having to come back to ask for your approval. So that is what today's meeting is for. Get this here. Okay. Oh, all right. So the 24, as I mentioned, action plan is for our HUD entitlement. Hamilton County Community Development Division is responsible for administering the county's approximately $5.4 million HUD allocation each year of formula grants for the formula grant programs. And these grants consist of community development block grants, also known as CDBG, our home investment partnership grants, known as HOME, and emergency solutions grants, known as ESG. And these grants are used to help in creating viable communities through the development of decent housing and affordable housing, also through creating sustainable living environments, addressing homelessness needs and services, and expanding economic development opportunities for people of low to mod income throughout Hamilton County. The Community Development Division administers the HUD funds to 43 participating jurisdictions throughout Hamilton County. This next slide is the proposed 2024 CDBG budget. Our total CDBG budget is approximately or estimated around $3.4 million. The way that that budget is being allocated is that approximately $1.2 million will go towards community-specific projects and programs. $1.7 million will go towards community-wide programs, such as fair housing services, nonprofit services, home improvement programs, homeowner housing programs, facade improvement, a pilot program, community and economic development assistance program. And $500,000 of that will go towards the planning and administering of those programs. We anticipate program income of around or over $72,000, which will give us a total budget for CDBG budget for 2024 of just over $3.4 million. This next budget is the proposed 2024 budget for home and ESG. The way that this is allocated is the total budget for home is estimated at $1.7 million, with $171,000 of that going towards administration, approximately $256,000 going towards a Chodo project, and $1.2 million of that going towards the housing development projects and programs. Regarding the ESG budget, we estimate a budget of approximately $295,000 for 2024. Those funds will be used, $273,000 of that will be used for rapid rehousing programs and homeless prevention. And the remaining $22,000 will go towards administering of those funds. Every 3 to 5 years, HUD requires that each grantee complete a consolidated plan. The consolidated plan outlines the housing, community development, and economic development needs and priorities that will be addressed with the community development block grants, home funds, and ESG funds. Hamilton County's 5-year consolidated plan, was completed in March of 2020 for HUD program year running from 2020 to 2024. The consolidated plan identified affordable housing, public improvements, and economic development programs as its highest priority need. Hamilton County's next consolidated plan, which will run from 2025 to 2029, is due in May of 2025. The annual action plan, which I'm giving you a summary of today, is required, as I mentioned before, annually by HUD. The action plan describes the activities that will be taken with Hamilton County's block grant, home, and ESG funds. The activities that these funds are used for should align with the priorities of our consolidated plan. And as a part of the annual action plan development, we are required to obtain public input during development and prior to submission of the proposed action plan. Hamilton County's 2024 action plan is due on May 16, 2024. Hamilton County is currently awaiting our HUD announcement for our 2024 entitlement. In 23, our entitlement totaled $5.4 million. Our program year runs from July 1st, 2024, and will run through June 30, 2025. So this chart that I have here before you is just to give, since I don't have the exact 24 entitlement numbers today, I just wanted to give you an idea of the variance in the funding each year. And in 22, in community development block grant funds, of the 22 community development block grant funds that we received in relation to what we received in 23, there was an increase in our 23 funding of just over $38,000. In home funds, in 23, we received a little over $9,000 more than what we received in 22. And we received just over $6,000 more in our ESG funding from HUD in 2023 over what was received in 22. So I just wanted to point out that based on historic and trends, it appears that each year our funding does increase slightly. So our 2024 funds will increase slightly over what we received in 23, which is here before you. 3.4 was last year, 1.7 in home, and 295 in ESG. Now, the CDBG funds must be used for activities that meet one of three objectives, national objectives. One is benefits low and moderate income persons or families, aids in the prevention or elimination of slum and blight, and it must meet an urgent need, which is typically due to natural disasters. Now, some of the eligible uses of our CDBG funds include, but are not limited to, acquisition and demolition for LMI uses, improvements to public facilities such as parks and senior centers, and public infrastructure such as water and sewer facilities, streets, and sidewalk repairs. The funds can also be used for public services such as employment services, crime prevention and public safety, child care, services for senior citizens, health services, and food access, just to name a few. CDBG funds can also be used as provisions of assistance to profit-motivated businesses to carry out economic development and job creation and retention activities. The proposed 2024 CDBG budget will be allocated as follows. 14% of the block grant funding will go toward to fund planning and administration. 35% of the block grant funds will go towards community projects, and 51 or 52% of the funding will go toward community-wide programs. Now, our community development block grant funds are also administered through two competitive programs. One being the Community and Economic Development Assistance Program, that is also known as CDAP. The estimated budget for 2024's program is $800,000. The maximum grant award in this program is $300,000. And this program is specifically for local governments to apply for capital improvement projects, infrastructure projects, and things of that nature. The other competitive program that we use to administer a portion of our block grant funds is our nonprofit services grant program. We estimate that there'll be a budget of approximately $500,000 for this program in '24. The minimum grant award amount is $20,000. There is no maximum grant award with this particular program. We are adding 2 new programs to our 2024 CDBG programs. One is the Home Improvement Loan Program. Christian was just presenting on that program before me. A portion of the funding that is going into the county's Home Improvement Loan Program is $200,000 of our community development block grant funds. And those funds will be used to cover the actual improvements to the homes. We are also administering or introducing a new program, a countywide facade improvement program. This will be a pilot program in '24. The budget for this program is $50,000. This program will be targeted to a limited number of jurisdictions, and if successful in this first pilot year, we will look to expanding this program into other communities in the county in the coming years. Our next entitlement is our Home Investment Partnership Program. Home is the largest federal block grant that the state and local governments that is designated exclusively for the creation of affordable housing for low-income households. Home funds can be used for costs such as acquisition, demolition, rehab, and new construction of residential buildings, which includes single-family and multifamily units. The funds can be used to help cover soft costs, pre-development costs, and developer fees. Hamilton County's 2024 home fund allocation is estimated to be just over $1.7 million. Now, for home buyer projects, these are the projects where there are single-family homes created. Those units that are created as a single-family home will be targeted to families who make up to 80% of the area median income. Per the HUD 2023 income limits, that would be for a family of 4 with a household income of $80,900. For rental projects, the multifamily units, these units are targeted to families who make up to 60% of the area median income. Per the HUD 2023 income limit, this would be, for example, a family of 4 that makes $50,550 annually. The proposed home budget allocation, or 2024 proposed home budget allocation, is as follows. 10% would be allocated for administration. 15% will be allocated for a Chodo project, and 75% will be allocated for housing projects, development projects. And also, I'd like to note that these funds can only be used to pay for the cost of HUD-assisted units. The home general rules that apply with the administering of the county's home funds is that the project must be located within one of the 43 participating jurisdictions in Hamilton County. The projects that are located in the city of Cincinnati are not eligible for use of county home funds. However, there is one exception, and that exception is if the project is developed of a special for a special housing need, such as permanent supportive housing. That would be eligible or could be eligible, but the city of Cincinnati also has to make a substantial financial contribution to that project as well. The availability of home funds are capped at a maximum of $75,000 per home assistant unit, with a total of $750,000 per project. We do consider seven of the high poverty communities in the county: Addiston, Arlington Heights, Lincoln Heights, Lockland, Elmwood Place, and Gulf Manor and Cheviot. In those particular communities, the per unit cap is $100,000 per unit. And also another note is that to be eligible for funds, that the project must include a development of at least 4 housing units. That includes single family or multifamily. And then our last HUD entitlement is our Emergency Solutions Grant. These funds are passed through to Strategies to End Homelessness. Strategies is the lead agency for the continuum of care to assist the homeless in the city of Cincinnati and Hamilton County, in coordinating services such as homelessness prevention, emergency shelter, and housing solutions towards the goal of ending homelessness. The proposed 2024 ESG budget allocation is as follows. Of the $295,000 estimated grant amount, $273,000 of that will go towards rapid rehousing and homelessness diversion. And $22,000 of that will go towards administering of the funds, or the programs, I'm sorry. Now, the 2024 annual action plan process, as I stated earlier, requires citizen participation. It also requires that we open this up to a comment period for the public. The comment period started April 4th and will end on May the 9th. Input to the annual action plan was announced and solicited by email to county stakeholders, public notices in the Cincinnati Court Index, the Cincinnati Herald, as well as the Cincinnati Enquirer. It was also announced through the county's website, and we also have an online survey that is being used for input as well. The public hearings, the first public hearing for our 24 action plan was held on April 4th here in your chambers. The next public hearing will be held on May the 9th in your chambers at 1 o'clock, okay. The action plan timeframe. So as I mentioned, the comment period opened on April 4th. A draft of the 2024 action plan was made available to the public on April 4th. On April 30th, all the participating jurisdictions have been asked to submit 3-year community project applications if they choose to participate in the next 3 years of funding allocation. On May the 9th is when our comment period ends, the final public hearing, and the Board of County Commissioners' consideration of the 2024 action plan will be requested. And then this is how the public can send or submit comments. You can't really see, but anyway, you can send written comments to me, my email address, or at the above address, which is the 138 East Court Street address, room 1002. Or they can go online to the Community Development webpage, and there is a survey that they can use to provide input into our plan. And that's it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I open it up, Vice President Treehouse.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I don't have any questions. I appreciate all the time and effort that goes into complying with the regulations that surround all these grants. So I really appreciate your time here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Dumas?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I would like for you to better explain for me the administration component of it. I know HUD has you can only go to a certain percentage of the grant for administration, and it depends on how much you receive from each grant. So just for instance, the CDBG budget said 14% for administration.
Exactly. Yes. So with the actually with the block grant, we can actually go up to 20%.
Okay.
Yes, for administration. But what happens is those go into some of the community-wide programs like the fair housing services and so on and so forth.
Okay.
So that's where some of that funding goes to. That would go towards actual administration.
And so that helps. So for instance, the CDBG grant, is a particular person assigned to the HUD grant to make sure we meet the criteria that they're asking, or is the whole department as far as administration does it? How do you do that?
Yes, so as I mentioned before, we administer these funds through a few different programs. The Nonprofit Services Program, the Community and Economic Development Program, the Home Program. There are program managers that are assigned as leads to those programs to ensure that, we are from the actual, before the release of the RFP to the actual execution of the subcontract, subrecipient agreements, that we are, following the process correctly and we are in compliance in that process. Now, excuse me, after the subrecipient or the agreements have been awarded or approved or executed, then the program managers are assigned to monitor those funding agreements to ensure compliance with reporting and to us as collecting the correct data, as well as reporting to HUD. We do not approve any draws on any of the invoices or funding or payment requests until we have ensured that all the appropriate data has been collected from each of the subrecipients for their particular funding or program.
Thank you for that. And you were saying you could go up to 20%. Was that just for CDBG, or what about the home budget?
So the home budget is a smaller budget. Yeah, so we don't have as much funding in our home budget there. With our home budget, it is 15% is the max that we can go to or is the cap for our administrating fee.
Thank you. And lastly, the ESG, I see the administration cost is a little lower, but what?
Yeah, we don't get very much in that. So so that's just about 10% of the total funding for ESG that goes toward administering those funds.
So specifically as we relate to the ESG grant about the homeless, so we have an administrator over strategies for to end homelessness. So the administration, would that person, Kevin Finn, would he be during the administration of this project, which is already, I mean, all this stuff is already being done, but the difference is there's more money coming forth.
You're right.
So is there somebody specifically for this one to manage ESG?
Yes, there's a program manager in the Community Development Division that oversees the administering of our ESG funding to strategies.
So you would oversee
We
the strategies for
we
homelessness.
oversee strategies. We monitor. Matter of fact, I believe we just completed a monitoring of strategies of our ESG funds.
Okay. Okay. I think that's it for me. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I did have one question though, maybe because we got so much, HUD has to have these public hearings. I'm like, didn't we just do this?
We did it for the CAPER.
That's right. Okay, I gotta make sure. Okay.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much for this presentation, and we got the public. You got another question?
No, I was going to ask you maybe if anybody knew the name of the new HUD director since Fudge left. Do you know the name of the new HUD director?
No, I don't right off. No. We got a new HUD rep for the county, but I'm not sure who the director is right now.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. We got a public hearing that's been advertised.
May 9th. And then also too, just a little heads up. So I will be back again with the CDAP recommendations. That's the Community Economic Development Assistance Program recommendation. That'll be sometime this month. I'm probably April 30th is what I'm thinking, looking at the calendar. And then our home recommendations for our home program, the affordable housing. I'll be back.
How did all these recommendations hit at the same time?
Well,
It's that time of the year, I guess.
well, we changed our program year, and when we changed our program year, it shifted our programs, the release of our RFPs for our program. So we're still kind of playing around with that, trying to find out what is the best timing. So we're not just like back to back to back with these. But I just want to give you a heads up that that will be coming before you all here soon. So,
Okay.
okay,
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
thank you.
Okay. All righty. Now we will, where's my numbers at? Here we go. All right, I make a motion to go into executive session 12122 G4 to discuss collective bargaining.
Second.
Commissioner Reese,
Yes.
Commissioner Dreehouse, Commissioner Summer Dumas.